No, I do not believe Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is a failure, but I also don't think that it's putting itself in a position to succeed sales-wise. Let's talk about it. There's been some conversation and some discussion lately about the actual success of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, a PlayStation 5 exclusive for now that is sold at $70. That right there will make up the crux of the issue I talk about later on. However, it's being reported by Daniel Ahmad on Twitter that Rebirth is underperforming, sales-wise. And he even goes on to say it's selling about half of what Remake sold in the same time frame, and looks like it'll have a weaker tail prior to any PS Plus-like release. IGN had a follow-up article on this exact topic, where the picture's a little bit more murky. I don't think it's safe to say that Rebirth is selling poorly, but I also don't think it's okay to say that it's absolutely blowing 16 and Remake out of the water or anything like that. But for a game that had as much fanfare and hype as Rebirth, and a game that I'm significantly enjoying, and that will almost certainly be in contention for a Game of the Year for quite a few people, what's going on here? Should it have sold even more? Well, I think, funnily enough, the reason that Rebirth is not selling everything out of the freaking water is not intrinsically because of the actual characteristics and qualities of the game itself, but more so the environment in which it's surviving in. Rebirth is a PlayStation 5 exclusive in the year 2024. And funnily enough, I think IGN is kind of on the money with some of their analysis on this idea, that Remake came out in 2020 and enjoyed that significant boon that a lot of other games, well, were able to enjoy. But also, the PS4 player base was more installed than the PS5 player base is nowadays. So Remake simply sold to more people. And Rebirth is a $70 game on top of that. It's layers upon layers of Rebirth just putting itself not in a position to succeed, or to at least blow things out of the water. Now, I love Rebirth. I absolutely adore this game. It has its issues, absolutely, but I don't think they detract overall from how great the game is on the whole. And most of the issues that I have with the game come from the side content, and the main story and characters and music, which is probably what most people care about, is phenomenal for the most part. I haven't beaten the game yet, and don't worry, I'm not gonna spoil anything in this video, outside of who may be party members, but again, it's 7, so kinda know that. I think people on the whole are really receptive and enjoying Rebirth, and IGN even states that if you talk about the people who've actually bought the game, retention numbers are pretty good for a single-player game. The enjoyment coming from the product is not the issue, it's getting into it. And I'm sorry, but Final Fantasy is simply not a console seller anymore. It's not gonna be one of those highest tier exclusives that Sony has up their sleeve that they can just pump out and do insane numbers, even on limited hardware. It's not a Spider-Man. It's not a God of War. It's not one of those entries. I think Final Fantasy is a series whose main audience and player base is now spread out amongst multiple different platforms, and when you keep releasing your newest and greatest games on a console specifically, only one of them, you're segregating a lot of your potential player base. And for a series like Final Fantasy, I don't think, if it really wants to grow from here, remaining exclusive should be on the table. On top of that, it's also a $70 game in the year 2024, a game that has already had numerous breakout successes, and a year that's shaping up to be extremely good for RPGs and JRPGs. So in what is shaping up to be an extremely competitive year, you release in February at the cost of $70 on only the PlayStation 5, and when we view it through that lens, I think the numbers, and I said this back in regards to Final Fantasy 16 as well, they make sense. You could also maybe make the argument that with the remake games being essentially a sequel/follow-up to 7, not a traditional remake of the original story, that could also have some effect on the numbers. I can't imagine it's too much, and I don't think it's far more significant in any conceivable or measurable way than the game simply being an exclusive in the year 2024 at $70. I know just from my own community, quite a few people are waiting for the PC port, and maybe the PC port is an absolute banger and is able to draw in a lot more people. Maybe that's the case. I don't know if it did that for Remake. I haven't seen those numbers, but it can't hurt either. But I also think Final Fantasy being this console exclusive, even a timed exclusive, is counterintuitive to its overall growth and potential. I love Final Fantasy. I love it unabashedly so. And I loved Final Fantasy 16, and I love Remake, and I love Rebirth, and I love 7. I love Final Fantasy. I want to see the series grow grow and prosper, which I think it can do. Rebirth in a lot of ways addresses pretty much every single issue or problem that it had in Remake, and tries to do at least better, or go in a different direction. It doesn't nail it all the time, but I can respect them for at least trying. And there's only a few categories I think they need to rein it in for the third game. I don't know how I'll feel about the ending or the story from this point on. I'm about like 78% of the way through the game. I think that's what the PS5 is telling me. I'm in chapter 11, but I've been loving it, and the side content has been wildly hit or miss for me. But even in regards to that, I wouldn't say that the game is bad or anything, or that that would be the reason that the game is not selling all that well. I think the answer is just that simple. I think it's just $70 at a PS5 exclusive. You're releasing around halfway through the console generation's life cycle, instead of right near the end, where you already probably have the maximum number of players that console generation is going to see. And while the PS5 is selling well in regards to at least the Xbox, overall it's nothing to be like blown away by, at least from what I've seen. And by what I've seen, I mean on Twitter. And even in Sony's own words, they're not Sony's own words, I'm paraphrasing wildly here, by the way, they're not particularly blown away by it either. I think they said underperforming, but I don't know where that quote comes from, so don't quote me on that. But you're coming off the high that the video games industry and tech really overall saw in 2020 and 2021, so you're seeing less numbers just because of that. That's part of it. You have the game being priced at $70 on a console where the install base is just less than what it had with Remake. All these factors mixed together seems like the smoking gun. It's some mixture of those combinations. Now, I think the game can do well long term. It needs a rock-solid PC port, because I think the combat overall is greatly improved from Remake. It's not perfect, but I think it's overall improved. The level design is better. The open world isn't the best thing ever, and kind of boils down to a Ubisoft checklist thing to do. But again, the important things for a Final Fantasy game generally: combat, story, music, characters. It nails those. Largely, the only character I dislike playing as is Cait Sith. That's the only one. I like everyone else. And yeah, like some people can bring up the idea that performance mode is a little bit blurry in terms of the graphical fidelity. I don't think that would not sell units, right? I don't think that'd be like a major mitigating reason. That's the reason this game's not selling well. I don't think it's one of those. I think for the future of Final Fantasy, and I've talked about this idea before, it, in my opinion, should go multi-platform. I think Final Fantasy probably wants to go multi-platform. Remember back at the Fan Fest for Final Fantasy XIV, where they even brought Phil Spencer on stage to essentially talk about the future of Final Fantasy, not just 14 from what I recall, almost breaking away from the binds of being an exclusive. And maybe that with the remake games in the trilogy, they already have a pre-existing deal with Sony, so they have to abide by it. Maybe like that's the case. But I think Final Fantasy should, at its earliest opportunity, explore going multi-platform on day one for its releases. I think it will see massively improved sales because of that, and just overall more hype, especially if you can release on PC day one. I think the quality of the games are there, the passion is there, the greatness in the franchise is still there. It needs to expand its horizons. I think it's as simple as that. Also, stop selling for $70. Most people aren't gonna buy for that. In an especially competitive year, in the last competitive couple of years, simply upping from 60 to 70 will drive away sales. That just makes sense. It's more expensive. Sure, I can look at the quality of the game and go, yeah, it's probably worth the 70. But for a lot of people out there who are interested in more games than just Final Fantasy, that's gonna be a tough sell. That's the thing with Final Fantasy. It's not been putting itself in a position to succeed, and I think it needs to start doing that. So is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth a failure? No. I don't think it's a complete success. I think it stumbles in places. Whereas Remake went to one extreme in terms of gameplay, Rebirth went to the other. I think they need to find a middle ground, but the bigger issue is stop being an exclusive, release on multiple platforms including PC on day one, and that by itself may solve a lot of issues. If you also want to, go back to $60. There's a lot of game sales nowadays. People are willing to wait. And with that, I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts on Rebirth. Do you like the game? Do you not like the game? Let me know. And also, what do you want to see out of Final Fantasy in the future? Do you want them to make the move to multi-platform? Do you not want them to? Do you want them to stay at 70 and go back to 60? Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody, until we meet again.